Season 8 of the Prismatic Draft League was a lot of fun, to say the least. But now, after a bit of a break, it is time to jump to Season 9, and it's going to be an interesting one for a lot of reasons. But before we get into it, if you followed this league over the last few seasons, you know that there are some coaches who change their team name and their logo and whatnot every single season, and I have never done that. I've been using the Halifax Masquerade Men brand longer than I've even been in the PDL. There's something that I like about having one sort of strong draft league brand associated with myself and with my channel now that I've started doing YouTube since I joined this league. And I like that consistency and the sort of sense of identity that comes from it. All that said, watching some people change their team names season after season after season and get creative over a period of time did make me eventually start to wonder at some point, is the grass really greener? Well, okay, it's probably not greener, but maybe the grass is still interesting over on the other side of the field, right? And so some time ago, like probably at least a year ago, I told myself, if ever I win a PDL championship, then the next season after that, I will experiment with a different team name. It wouldn't feel right to play as the Halifax Masquerade Men so many seasons in a row and then not actually win my first championship with that name, so I'm setting a championship as a precondition. But after that, at least just one time, I will try another team name and see how it feels. So, the Masquerade Men are going to take a break to savor the championship from Season 8. Gonna have a good rest. Probably will be back for Season 10, but for now, it is time for Season 9 to introduce to you your Toronto Rock Slide. This is the new team name for this season, and I might have to enter another draft league besides only the PDL at some point so that I have an excuse to use this again, because I do plan to bring the Masquerade Men back, but I wanted to try something different, and the Toronto Rock Slide is what we're going with right now. Let's talk about the format for Season 9, because this one's really something. It is... I always tease like a brand new format whenever the PDL gets creative, and this one is new to me, but it is not new to the PDL. They have decided, as sort of a celebration of the league's success so far, and ahead of whatever special thing they're cooking up for Season 10, they decided this time to run back the very same format, more or less, from Season 1. The PDL is going back to its roots here, and that means a lot of things about what we're going to see in this draft. First of all, this is a Generation 8 Sword and Shield draft league. It's still VGC style. It's still draft 11 Pokemon, bring 6 to each matchup, pick 4, best of 3, closed team sheets. All that you've seen in past seasons is the same, but we are playing Sword and Shield now. Most teams, not all, will be legal in VGC 2022. We'll get into the exceptions in a moment, but think of that as roughly the base format that we're using, even if we actually need a special challenge code sometimes. That means Dynamax is here and Terastal is not. It means Generation 9 Pokemon are not here, not a single one, but some Pokemon that didn't make it into Scarlet and Violet, including things like the Ultra Beasts and the Tapu, are here. So it's going to be interesting, for sure. I'm really looking forward to sort of dusting off a part of my brain that I haven't used in a while. I started playing VGC formats in Sword and Shield, although I only started going to tournaments in Scarlet and Violet. It's going to be weird to adjust to this sort of thinking again. Pokemon are, as always, sorted into tiers. We'll look at that in a moment, but first, last couple notes on Pokemon legality. Restricted legendary Pokemon are generally banned, except some of the weaker ones are legal, because I guess the staff for Season 1 just thought it would be fun to open up a few of the not very strong restricted Pokemon. You could probably imagine which ones, make them available. And the real trick for this season, the part that I had trouble getting my head around until very close to the draft, is Mythical Pokemon. Mythical Pokemon are broadly allowed this season, and I mean all of them up to Generation 8, not limited to ones that exist in Sword and Shield. So this is definitely where we might need a special challenge code. I'm not sure whether one has been made yet, but even if a Mythical Pokemon... Gen 9 Mythical... So Pecharunt is still not here, but up to Gen 8, even if a Mythical Pokemon does not exist in Sword and Shield, it's available in this league with, I don't know, some kind of national dex move list or something. Even now, I don't really completely have my head around how it works, but we could be seeing a lot of Mythicals this season, which is always a lot of fun. As far as the format of the draft goes, This is the same kind of image you've seen many times, but the details do change from season to season. There will be 11 rounds in the Snake Draft, and there are 16 teams drafting, so 16 teams times 11 rounds. I have these spots here to fill out in my roster. Pokemon are organized into tiers, so generally the strongest Pokemon for the format are in S+, and then the next strongest are in S, and then A, B, C, D, and also untiered, which is everything that didn't make it into any higher tier than that. I can fill out this roster in any order over the course of the draft, making one pick at a time round by round, so I don't have to take an S+ or S Pokemon first. I can take a D tier Pokemon first if I want. These top 2 slots, what goes into them is related, so what I pick for one of them will influence what I'm able to pick for the other. The allowed combinations are S+ and B, or S and A. But if I take an S+ Pokemon, I cannot get a free A tier Pokemon. And finally, this is always the case in the PDL, although I'm not used to seeing rules like it in other draft leagues. The PDL is relatively restrictive about being able to swap out Pokemon that you've drafted. I will be able to trade any Pokemon that I've drafted to another coach if I can negotiate a trade, although I never have actually done that or even really tried very hard to. But the only Pokemon that I can swap back to the draft board, that I can swap out for Pokemon that were not drafted or are not on anyone's roster at the time of the trade, are the ones in these 4 slots here. These are called the free agent slots in this league because they're the only ones that are eligible for those free agent trades. And they're also the only slots that cost points. I have a budget of 130 points, and you can see the prices of each Pokemon sorted by tier on the side here. You cannot take an S+ or S tier Pokemon as a free agent slot, so I will only get one Pokemon from one of those 2 tiers. And then it's 40 for an A and all the way down to 20 for an untiered. And with all that said, I think it's time to jump into the draft. So I didn't have much of a plan for this one. Like I said, I didn't really understand the format until basically the night before the draft, and I hadn't given a ton of thought. In fact, some of the tier list came out a little bit weird because they started off just using the season 1 tier list when the staff just had less experience at sorting Pokemon into tiers for a draft league. And generally in the PDL, there's a period where people are, before the draft, we're given the initial tier list, and people are allowed to make suggestions for Pokemon to move up and down, and coaches then vote. And so you just use Discord reactions to vote, and if there's a certain threshold in favor of a change, then the change is implemented in the draft board. The reason I bring that up is there was not a lot of tier change activity this season. I think most people were just kind of not thinking about it. I honestly forgot to participate in it. I might have had some opinions, but I forgot to have any. And so some of the tier lists still came out a little bit weird. There's some Pokemon that are probably not exactly where they should be. But also, I say this to highlight that I was not thinking that much about the draft before it actually started. The other thing with this season is the draft order was not revealed until right before the draft started. And so when I did think about it, I was basically thinking, well, if I get the first overall pick, what might I do with that? And I had a couple of ideas. One idea was to just hoard a lot of mythical Pokemon, right? Mythical Pokemon are not very often legal. They're very weird and interesting Pokemon, as I've been saying in my current ongoing series where I spin a wheel and get a random legendary or mythical Pokemon. And it could be a lot of fun to pile a bunch of them up, but there were a few reasons I didn't want to do that. One, there's not a ton of synergy between some of the mythical Pokemon. Just draft a bunch of them and figure out the synergy later. Runs the risk that you don't manage to do that other part. But also, because of the way the PDL tier list works, I could get maximum 4 Pokemon from A tier or higher, and if that's if I don't take an S+. And a lot of mythical Pokemon, a lot of the most interesting ones were in S+, but also pretty much all of the mythical Pokemon were in A or higher. So, and a lot were in S+ or S. So that was very restrictive in terms of actually being able to draft a lot of interesting ones. It didn't really feel super worthwhile. There's Fiona down in C tier, but I can't figure out what I would do with that in this format. So that was one reason to drop that idea. The other, of course, was that Regulation J is the current ladder format in VGC, so although a lot of the appeal of mythical Pokemon is I never get to play with these things. Actually, I do get to play with them right now in Scarlet and Violet. I've been making a lot of content lately with them, in fact, so yeah, I didn't feel like I needed to take that approach. The other thing that I was thinking about doing if I got the first overall pick was just making a really strong speed control statement immediately. I was thinking maybe something like Regieleki, which is the fastest Pokemon of the game, and also gets access to Electro Web, Thunder Wave, and Max Airstream. Remember, Max Airstream is in this format because Dynamax is. Or, on the flip side, I could take Mimikyu first overall. That was in the A tier. It was, it's probably the best Trick Room setter. I mean, there's Indeedee, of course, but Mimikyu is a contender for best Trick Room setter in this format because it's very hard to remove. And I could go in a hard Trick Room direction with my team. That was another thought for if I got the first pick. Funnily enough, actually, the difficulty of adjusting back to Sword and Shield brain is a big part of why I didn't go that route, because I'm just so Ursaluna-pilled right now, right? Every Trick Room team I build now has Ursaluna on it. Since I'm playing Scarlet and Violet restricted formats, usually like Ice Ride or Calyrex is on there. And because I'm so used to those Pokemon, I looked over the draft board for Trick Room attackers, and I was just like, what is this? There aren't any bears here. This Trick Room must suck in this format. Where are the strong Trick Room attackers? Never mind that, of course, the draft board featured Hatterene, Stakataka, Conkeldurr, Glastrier. There are actually a lot of good Trick Room attackers in this format, but I'm just so used to Ursaluna that I missed that in the early part of the draft, which is definitely a pretty silly mistake that I made. Maybe I would have gone a Trick Room route had that not happened, but that is not what I ended up doing. Instead, the first round pick that I'm slowly building to here was actually pretty reactive. I did not have the first overall pick. I had the 12th out of 16. So most people made a pick before I did. And two of the first Pokemon to go were Charizard and Colossal. Those were both in the first few picks because, of course, in Sword and Shield, they're very strong with their Gigantamax forms and G-Max moves that do significant residual damage turn by turn, while also Charizard and Colossal have ways to power themselves up so that they have a lot of offense coming out immediately with things like Weakness Policy, Steam Engine, Solar Power. If you watch Wolf Glick, which certainly I do, so if you watch this channel, maybe you do as well, you know he's talked at length about how broken he thinks that these G-Max forms are, and the tournament success that he's had with Colossal in particular. Of course, Charizard had a lot of tournament success back in Sword and Shield. So those were two of the early picks. Rapid Striker Shifu was actually the first overall pick, so probably want something to be taking Surging Strikes, right? And there was talk in the Discord chat that the other two Pokemon that get those same kinds of residual damage Gigantamax forms, Venusaur and Blastoise, were probably going to be taken fairly soon because they too are extremely powerful. It's just a very powerful G-Max effect. And so I made a little bit of a reactive pick in round one. I didn't really have a clear plan, and I decided to kind of just let myself be influenced by the chat. People who drafted before me said that they kind of wanted these Pokemon. I thought, oh, maybe I kind of want them too. Also, here's my first round pick. It was Blastoise. Blastoise matches up pretty well into Charizard, Colossal. It can at least take a Surging Strikes. It was a pretty good answer to a lot of what else had been drafted in the first round. So Pokemon that other coaches had signaled they were going to build around. Obviously, you still build a whole other roster with 10 more Pokemon around it. Blastoise isn't going to solve this format by itself, but I definitely do like Gigantamax Blastoise as a tanky attacker in this format. It was pretty good at times in Sword and Shield, and so I went ahead and drafted it. A couple of other highlights here. Number one, I have said before on this channel that of all the super battle transformations in Pokemon, I find Dynamax relatively visually boring. I do actually like Dynamax gameplay-wise. I know some people hate it. I personally find it fun. But the trade-off, right, compared to Mega Evolution, the trade-off for scaling a super transformation to basically every Pokemon is that there's only so much that they can do with it visually. And Pokemon gets bigger, which I think is not even really what happens, but Pokemon appears to get bigger and there are red clouds around it. I don't find very interesting. I think they did a better job with Terastal of making that kind of at least visually striking, but Dynamax is a little bit rough in that specific way. That said, while I don't think Gigantamax for the most part does all that much to fix the visuals of Dynamax, there are a couple of Gigantamax forms that I like a lot, and Blastoise is certainly one of them. Watching it just fire away with those cannons coming out of its shell all over the place is something I really enjoyed back in the Sword and Shield cartridge games, and so I'm not at all unhappy to be getting one of my favorite Gigantamax Pokemon here in this draft where we go back to a Dynamax format. It's a pretty good start for me there, I think. Also, I took Blastoise in one of my free agent slots because I had at this point not decided whether I was going to take an S plus tier Pokemon or not. And of course, if I take a free A tier Pokemon, so one that doesn't cost points, then I cannot take an S plus. I have to take an S with it. I was still very much considering taking an S plus at this point. So basically what this means is that I traded flexibility later for flexibility now. By taking Blastoise in a free agent slot in this draft, I still have all my options open for the spots at the top of my roster list there. But remember, that means Blastoise is now going to be one of the 4 Pokemon that I can trade out freely over the course of the season. And given that it's my first round pick that I'm planning to build around the rest of the way, I'm probably not going to want to do that. So this choice means that the rest of my draft is somewhat easier, but making trades later would be harder. And that could have an impact, because remember, Season 8 started off very rough, and then a set of trades at the middle of the season turned it around. That kind of thing will be harder to pull off this time if I get into a position where I need it. But I think it's worthwhile for Blastoise. Blastoise is, I've talked about the Gigantamax form and the powerful damage that you can do with, I think it's called G-Max Cannonade, over the next few turns after you use it. But Blastoise also, it's just fairly bulky. It can be hard to remove if it Gigantamaxes. It gets Shell Smash and Water Spout, so I can go Turbo Offense with it. It's harder to pull off, but I can, outside of Dynamax. It also has a decent support move pool with things like Fake Out and Yawn, and as a bulky water type, it can be hard for opponents to remove. So it's not the strongest Pokemon in the world, but there are definitely a number of things I can do with it to make my opponents' lives somewhat more difficult. And I definitely was looking forward to building around it the rest of the way through the draft. So before we get into the rest of the draft, I do think that taking Blastoise first overall implies a few things that I have to keep in mind, right? Number one, despite everything that I've just said about how strong Blastoise is, it is not especially threatening in a lot of situations unless it is Gigantamaxed. So taking Blastoise round 1 means I probably want to Dynamax Blastoise often, probably in a majority of my games over the course of the entire season. And when I'm filling out the rest of my draft, I can account for how strong Pokemon are in Dynamax. I won't be maxing Blastoise every single time, but I kind of have to assume that I want to max Blastoise a lot of the time, and so I can't be drafting Pokemon that also are similarly dependent on the one Dynamax slot per game. Or if I do that, I have to be very careful about it. Blastoise also is kind of a tanky Pokemon. It probably could benefit, and it can be a setup attacker as well. It probably can benefit from a number of supports like Fake Out, Redirection, Screens. Simple things that you want on a lot of teams, but I definitely have those top of mind once I've committed to Blastoise. And Blastoise, of course, is a bulky water type, lends itself very nicely to a fire, water, grass core, those 3 types having that natural synergy that's always good in Draft League. So that's something for me to be keeping in mind heading later into the draft as well. All that said, my second round pick goes in a little bit of a different direction from everything that I just mentioned. And it honestly was a little bit of an indecisive pick. I had multiple paths I could take with Blastoise, right? Multiple ways to build out a Fire, Water, Grass core. I still had a number of options I was considering for the top slot on my roster, the most powerful one, the S plus or S slot. And I wasn't exactly sure what lane I wanted to go, and so I kind of just looked down the draft board for a Pokemon that I thought could pair reasonably well with Blastoise and was pretty strong for the tier that it was in. And honestly, yeah, I drafted this next Pokemon without really a specific plan. I just figured I could find the synergy and make it work, and it was a decent value pick while I took my time seeing how other people's drafts shook out and filled out the rest of my plan from there. And so the Fire, Water, Grass core will come, and a number of the supports that I talked about will come, but for round 2, I just made kind of a quiet pick in Alchemy. I thought Alchemy was pretty strong for a C-tier Pokemon. We've seen it put in work in recent PDL seasons. Granted, all the recent seasons have been lower power formats than this, but Alchemy I like as a support for Blastoise because, of course, it gets Decorate. That's kind of its signature thing. And Blastoise, although very strong and tanky and powerful in its Gigantamax form, it does have some limitations on how hard it hits. So if I can get a Decorate into Blastoise, I think that could be very powerful in a lot of positions. We've also seen Alchemy succeed in this league as a setup attacker in its own right with moves like Acid Armor and Calm Mind. Alchemy's abilities, I don't remember off the top of my head what these abilities do. I think at least one of them prevents allies from falling asleep. but those give it nice passive support as well, no matter what kind of set it's running. Fairy typing is always valuable. Fairy is a very strong type, and I thought Alchemy, it's not the strongest fairy type, but I thought it was pretty good for being all the way down in the C tier. And so, like I said, worthwhile for this little quiet pick. And again, Decorate into Blastoise, I think, could be devastating under the right circumstances if I get the positioning right. Not the easiest thing to pull off, but I think it can be a lot of fun. I'll also note, of course, this gives me access to Gigantamax Alchemy, which I don't know how often I'll be bringing that. I mean, probably a lot of the time I'll bring an Alchemy with the Gigantamax factor, because why not? I don't know how often I'll be maxing Alchemy, but the option does exist. And given that I have bulky Blastoise, I want screens and stuff later, a Gmax move that heals allies might be situationally pretty valuable sometimes. That said, I don't think we'll be seeing a lot of Gmax Alchemy. It is also one of the better Gmax designs, though. In round 3, I was pretty sure I wanted my fire type. A number of good fire types were being drafted already, and I didn't want to miss out. But I did have some real trouble deciding which one I wanted. I was looking for quite a while at Blaziken, which I thought could complement Blastoise very nicely, being sort of faster, not as bulky, but more offensive, hitting on the physical side, while Blastoise probably wants to use special attacks a lot of the time. I thought fighting typing could be valuable into some of the Pokemon that threaten Blastoise, like Cradily will eventually be drafted in this league, and it has that rock typing along with Storm Drain. Blaziken gets, speed boost, coaching. It has a number of ways to improve its allies' stats. I thought Blaziken was a really interesting pick. I think it might well still have been the better one, even though I didn't take it. But I also had a feeling that this team was not necessarily going to end up with a lot of speed control. And I was a little bit concerned about some of the, Magearna Trick Room, Hatterene Trick Room kinds of teams that were forming. And so I ended up going with a fire type that I thought, unlike Blaziken, could wall some threats and give Blastoise more support into certain offensive matchups that could otherwise threaten to overwhelm it. As well as another setup attacker that could benefit from a number of the same supports that I wanted to build out around Blastoise and give me an alternative mode. And so Volcarona ultimately was my third round pick, taking a B tier slot. Notice I haven't put it in this top A or B slot, because at this point I'm still keeping open the option of taking a free A tier Pokemon. I think at this point I probably won't, but I'm still keeping the option open. So Volcarona goes in this B tier slot here. Yeah, Volcarona is stronger into some matchups than others. Blaziken is stronger into some matchups than others. There are trade-offs either way, but I like the Quiver Dance option. Like I said, I think Volcarona, I can support Quiver Dance Volcarona in a lot of the same ways that I can support Shell Smash or even Gigantamax Blastoise, and so there's sort of a natural synergy there. It's another strong Decorate recipient. It has a number of support techs to enable its teammates, so it can use Rage Powder to give Blastoise some of that redirection support that I want if I'm not relying on Volcarona for offense. I can set it up against certain Trick Room compositions and largely shut them down more effectively than anything else I'm drafting. Obviously, there are some risks with Volcarona. There's no Terra in this game, so any kind of Rock-type attack is immediately massively threatening in a way that it isn't into Blaziken. There are, again, pros and cons to both of those Pokemon. It was a tough decision, but I think given the right matchup and the right positioning, Volcarona can be very strong. And something that I meant to talk about back in the Blastoise section, but I forgot, is another thing that I'm looking for, because Blastoise doesn't have that immediate offense outside of Gigantamax. I am looking for Pokemon that hit hard throughout the draft to make up for Blastoise not always hitting hard. And Volcarona can certainly deliver on that. I do have to be careful about Rock-type attacks, though. Before we get into the next pick, there are a couple of other things to talk about. One, like I said, I am keeping open the option to take an S or S plus tier Pokemon, but at this point in the draft, I actually am pretty sure I'm taking an S plus, and I'm pretty sure I know what it is. In fact, if I'm taking an S plus, I definitely know what it is by about this point in the draft. Remember, the draft rules only allow you to take an S plus if you don't take a free A. And at this point, I think by about this point in the draft, every single other team had either taken an S or S plus already, so they'd already filled that top slot, or they had already taken a free A tier Pokemon, which meant that they were shut out from S plus. So by about this point, I knew that if I wanted an S plus, and I was pretty sure I did, I was just keeping my options open, but I was pretty sure, then I could decide right here which one it was going to be. It was impossible for anyone to take it. And I could just take it at the very end of the draft in round 11. And originally I was going to be kind of... I was going to introduce some suspense about this and only reveal what it was at the end. But actually it influences... The problem is having chosen my S Plus already, but not taking it until round 11, it influences a lot of my decisions through the rest of the draft. And so I think I have to actually just go ahead and say what it is right now. So at this point, before my 4th round pick, I am fairly certain that I'm going to take Regieleki in the last round of this draft. But I don't have to commit it until then. But I am thinking about that in terms of how it can complement Blastoise, setting fast screens, bringing electric coverage, mainly those things. And again, it is able to influence my decisions the rest of the way. And that brings us to round 4. And one other thing to note about this draft is that it moved pretty slowly. You get 12 hours to make a pick in this league, which I think is good. We're in a lot of different time zones and have varyingly busy lives. I think fewer than 12 hours would not be appropriate. But it means that when people use their time, it does take a while, which is fine, but it can be a little slow. And because the draft was moving slowly in round 4, I actually had a situation where through a lot of the time that I was waiting between my picks, I was pretty sure I knew what Pokemon I was going to draft, and then I ended up changing my mind fairly late in that window. Through a lot of that window, I thought that I was going to draft Shaman, the land form specifically, which was in the A tier, in round 4. That would complete a strong Fire, Water, Grass core. It would give me a mythical Pokemon, which is nice to have in a mythical draft. It would give me a strong grass type attack in Seed Flare that has that chance of lowering special defense, so it would also create openings for Blastoise and Volcarona. And Shaman has some decent coverage with moves like Air Slash and Dazzling Gleam. Notably, it has access to Max Airstream, which is the best move in the format. So that's all pretty compelling, right? And Shaman is very cute, and it's an adorable little design with, you know, base 100 stats across the board. Nothing amazing, but nothing terrible either. And so for a long while, I thought I was drafting Shaman, and then I changed my mind for a couple of reasons. One, Shaman isn't in Sword and Shield. I would have to actually get my head around Dexited mythical move lists in order to use one myself. That's not that serious. I could probably do that, but it is a little bit of a deterrent. But more importantly, Shaman would quadruple down at this point on special attackers. Blastoise is probably using special attacks. Alchemy is using special attacks if it's attacking at all. Volcarona is a special attacker. Regieleki, which I think I'm taking in round 11, can go physical, but it's usually stronger as a special attacker. Shaman complements special spam, right, with that Seed Flare, but it does make my team a little bit one-dimensional to be loading up on so many special attackers with so many of my highest tier slots. And although Shaman has decent coverage, I'm not sure what it's doing a lot of the time outside of just spamming Seed Flare, which is good, a good attack, but it is just one attack. There's not a ton of support that Shaman brings to the table or anything like that. Plus, Seed Flare is not very accurate. I would kind of have to be mentally prepared to miss it a lot of the time. Plus, there are a lot of support grass types on this draft board. Shaman could be very strong as an offensive grass type, but I don't feel like I need it necessarily. And so as time went on in this round, I kind of felt like I was souring a little bit on Shaman as we went. And there was another Pokemon in the A tier that stood out to me. One that I thought could pair nicely with Regieleki, and one that I think is at least as good a content pick as the Mythical Shaman, as we head into Legends ZA, which I believe will come out during this season, right? I ended up pivoting and picking 10% form Zygarde in the 4th round of the draft from the A tier, and once again in a free agent slot. And explaining what's out in the top left here, let me just note, I am only allowed to use Aura Break. The other ability is banned, so I do only get 10% Zygarde, no other form. But Zygarde is fast, and it's not a crazy strong physical attacker, but you know, you can slap a Choice Band or something on this, and it has some very strong spammable ground type attacks in 1,000 Arrows, even 1,000 Waves, maybe Lance Wrath in some situations. I'm not sure I remember what that one does. So as a fast ground type attacker, it's not the most powerful, but it can put in a lot of work in some situations. And like I said, I like pairing it with Regieleki, I think, because, one, you can go basically Disquake, right? Zygarde is immune to Regieleki's Discharge, and then Regieleki is not immune to Earthquake, but that's okay because you can click Thousand Arrows instead of Earthquake and still get spread ground-type damage that doesn't hit the partner and also does hit flying types. And then Zygarde being fast, like I said, I think I can slap a Choice Band on it, run it next to like Electro Web Regieleki, and then if they do have something that outspeeds, Eleki gives me that speed control so that Zygarde can get its attacks off. Obviously, it doesn't work in every single position, but I think it is a serious threat that opponents have to deal with in some positions that is very different from the Blastoise mode, and so makes it that much harder to prepare for everything I can throw at an opponent. Plus, I think it can complement the Blastoise mode, right? I can get chip damage with G-Max Cannonade, and then run fast attackers in the back in Regieleki and Zygarde to try to finish off weakened opponents, or I can flip that around. I can work Alchemy in there somewhere, or Volcarona, or the next Pokemon for support. I think this is a decent spread of flexible threats that complement each other fairly well here overall. Zygarde is a little bit weak, like I said, but if nothing else, I think it's a good content pick. And if it doesn't work out, I don't think anyone drafted Shaman unless someone scoops it up between this recap and me changing my mind. The option does exist to swap Zygarde out for Shaman after all. I was really sweating this decision a little bit, actually, because I was pretty sure at this point in the draft, like I said, the mythical Pokemon really concentrated in the high tiers. Regieleki is S+, so I don't get... This is the last slot that I can use for an A-tier Pokemon if I take Regieleki. And so I was pretty sure that drafting Zygarde would mean not getting any mythical Pokemon in the entire draft. And in the end, I decided Zygarde should be fun. It was probably worth it. Zygarde also has a decent support move pool that I almost forgot to mention there. It gets things like Haze, Breaking Swipe. It also can set up itself with Coil, so I have another setup option. And it should be a fun content pick heading into Legends ZA. Now for round 5, it is finally time to complete the Fire Water Grass core. And I still want some more redirections, some more support. And there was a Pokemon that I thought would be pretty good because I used its evolved form on one of my Sword and Shield teams back then. And I looked through the tier list and I didn't see this Pokemon. Untiered Pokemon, there's so many in this format that the staff didn't bother to list them. You just had to identify them yourself and declare that you were drafting one. And I didn't see this Pokemon in any of the tiers, and so I thought, wow, they made this thing untiered. It's way too strong for untiered. I need to scoop this up. This is going to be such a good value pick. And then I checked back a few hours later and I realized it actually was C tier. I just had missed it when I was scrolling. So that took a lot of the shine off this pick, but I still decided it was worthwhile in the end, and I drafted as my grass type Tangela. Tangela is kind of like, well, Tangrowth is kind of... Actually, Tangrowth has more of an offensive move pool and offensive stats. I used it as kind of Amoonguss at home. Low budget Amoonguss on one of my Sword and Shield teams back in that format, but Tangela is kind of low budget Amoonguss. It gets Rage Powder, it doesn't get Spore, but it does get Sleep Powder. It has some pretty good bulk with the Eviolite, obviously much better on the physical side than the special side, but I think it's a decent Eviolite Pokemon. Of course, I can also slap Regenerator on it, and it kind of works like Amoonguss in that way as well. I guess stuff like Stun Spore, I don't remember super well what else it gets. I was mostly interested in Sleep Powder and Rage Powder. And that special attack stat is not terrible, right? It can throw off some grass-type attacks to make it a little bit harder for things like Gastrodon to wall Blastoise. By this point of the draft, people were drafting a lot of water immunities. Turns out there are a lot of abilities that make Pokemon immune to water, and so things like Gastrodon, Credilly, and Toxicroak even were flying off the shelves at this point. But yeah, it's not Amoonguss, but I think it's a decent approximation, especially with Eviolite boosted bulk down in the C tier. I did think for a while about Foongus, which is in the D tier, but I just wasn't sure that brought quite enough to the table. I don't think it's as bulky as Tangela. And I can't remember what my other issue was with it now, but I decided I was still good with this pick. Should be an interesting one. Up next in round 6, if I have the picks in the right order in my head, I wanted a fighting type at this point. Largely because of that Credilly pick that I've mentioned a few times. Credilly is actually a huge threat into my team at this point, right? It's immune with Storm Drain to G-Max Cannonade. Not just immune, but of course redirects it and gets boosted by it as well. It is a rock type, so Volcarona is in danger against it. Alchemy, Tangela, Zygarde, none of those really bring anything to the table against it. Someone had drafted it at this point, and it genuinely is just a massive threat to my whole team. And I'd kind of been interested in a fighting type already when I was thinking about Blaziken earlier. I figured now was the time. I looked at steel types too, like Scizor, but there are a lot of good fighting types in this format with a lot of useful stats or support moves as well as their offense or something. I actually could have waited a little bit longer because I had a ton of options, but I decided to go ahead and try to get a really good one. And I looked at a lot of different fighting types. I was very interested in Buzzwole for a while as another sort of bulky attacker, but I didn't really like the speed tier and I didn't really like the double weakness to max airstream. But I was looking at Buzzwole for a while. Pheromosa was also an option. Conkeldurr, I think, was still available at this point. I think Blaziken might even have still been available. Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan. I even looked at Sock. But in the end, I picked a fighting type in the B tier that I thought was just a cut above a lot of the field, and that was Mienshao. It's an interesting Pokemon. It's pretty good on the right team, and I don't have much experience with it, but it's fast. It gives me a Regenerator Core with Tangela. But it also gets Inner Focus, protecting it from Fake Out and Intimidate, so I might be wanting to run that more often. Pretty good attack stat. Not the best move pool to take advantage of it, but it has a decent amount of coverage. It gets access to max airstream, so I can use it to make my Blastoise or Volcarona faster, if the position calls for it. It gets support moves like Fake Out and Feint. I can pivot around with U-turn. Just overall, one of the best B-tier fighting types that you can get in this format. I was looking at Buzzwole for quite a while. It would have been cool to draft an Ultra Beast, but I think Mienshao is a little bit more reliable. And now we come to the point in this draft where I thought about making a serious pivot in my plan. And I even teased in the Discord chat that I might be doing that. Because up to now, remember, I decided I was going to take Regieleki in the last round. But I had kept it flexible. See, Mienshao still is in this B tier slot here. I had kept open the option of changing my mind and taking an S tier Pokemon. And I almost switched to doing that in this round. And I didn't reveal on Discord what the possible change was, but basically I was concerned about immediate offense for my team, right? Blastoise, not that strong offensively, apart from G-Max Cannonade. Zygarde, gets some amazing spammable attacks, but the attack stat isn't great. Volcarona, awesome if it sets up, but it's not always going to be able to set up. Honestly, Mienshao here might have the highest attacking stat on the team so far. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I was a little bit, throughout the draft, I was thinking about immediate burst damage, and I was worried that I wasn't having enough of it. And so looking over my options for a B tier Pokemon in this slot here, I wasn't thrilled with what I was seeing. And I decided to take a glance up at the A tier, just to be sure, just to see. And Galarian Darmanitan caught my eye as an A tier Pokemon. I actually had been thinking about Galarian Darmanitan very, very early in the draft. Remember I said that Regieleki could have been one of the options I considered if I'd gotten the first overall pick. I was thinking that pairing it with Galarian Darmanitan could be a lot of fun. They have that Bolt Beam coverage. Regieleki gives Darmanitan some speed control support. Regieleki, again, mostly uses special attacks, while Darmanitan goes physical. I think there's a lot of synergy there, and that's one option that I was looking at, vaguely, without making a concrete plan going into the draft. And Galarian Darmanitan hits massively hard. It's a huge attack stat. It gets Gorilla Tactics, which is Choice Band, but an ability, which means you can also stack it with an actual Choice Band or a Choice Scarf. Or you can go Zen mode and get a speed boost at low HP, and while still having a very high attack stat and gaining fire typing. I thought Galarian Darmanitan might tie this team together nicely if I could pair it with a higher tier electric type. And at this point in the draft, because I had Blastoise and Zygarde already, I could not draft Galarian Darmanitan and Regieleki. It was one or the other. But what I could do was take another fast, powerful electric type in the S tier, a Pokemon that I'd been looking at as a Regieleki alternative anyway. Zeraora was still available. Zeraora is slower than Regieleki, but still one of the fastest Pokemon in the game. Probably like third or fourth fastest. It doesn't hit as hard as Regieleki, partly because it doesn't have Transistor. Actually, I think entirely because it doesn't have Transistor. I think the stats are there. But It has more of a physical attacking electric type move pool, Plasma Fists. It has a lot better coverage than Regieleki. It has coaching to enable teammates like Zygarde with that. Minshao actually can coach Zygarde as well, although being slower than Zygarde is a little awkward for that. But yeah, I was very seriously thinking at this point in the draft that I might throw out my Regieleki plan, and I might instead take, in some order, Zeraora. I would probably have to take Zeraora earlier than the last round, because there were still some people who could take S-tier Pokemon. I didn't know what their intentions were. But probably I would take Galarian Darmanitan first, and then Zeraora. And that would be a great content team, huh? Galarian Darmanitan, massively strong Dexited Pokemon, not in Scarlet and Violet. I still get my Zygarde. I get a Mythical and Zeraora. There was a lot that I liked about that idea, but I just wasn't quite sure. A lot of my idea behind this team had been built on Regieleki being the very fastest Pokemon and being able to set screens, which I don't think Zeraora can do. At least I don't think it gets both of them. Zeraora can do speed control with like Electro Web, but it's not as good at that as Regieleki is. So I was a little bit unsure. And I did that thing, the same kind of thing that I did when I was brainstorming trades going into the trades that I made last season, where I looked over, not my specific matchups this time, but I just looked over the rest of the league, what they drafted so far, and I didn't make concrete plans, but I sort of brainstormed what kinds of modes I could bring into those teams and which version I thought was better. And honestly, I thought it was kind of a wash. There were matchups where I thought that Zeraora and Darmanitan were better, but largely I thought that either one was fine, as compared to Regieleki and a certain other ice type that we'll talk about in a moment. In the end, there was a case for it for sure, but I came away just not convinced that Zeraora or Darmanitan was better, and I decided that I should stay the course, stick to the plan that I had, and stick to Regieleki, because it was kind of important to the rest of what I had in mind for this team. Obviously, Zeraora and Darmanitan would have been a much better content-brained pair of picks, and so I think you should like and subscribe for my integrity in not just completely succumbing to content brain and doing what seemed like it was probably best for the team, but it was a close call what was best. But in any case, I still wanted to pair Regieleki with an ice type for that complementary coverage, so my next pick was Weavile. And that finally committed a B-tier Pokemon to the slot, which meant I was definitely taking S+, and you know what it is, already in the top slot. Weavile is okay for immediate offense. It doesn't hit as hard as Galarian Darmanitan, but it hits pretty hard, and it's fast. And, I mean, that's I think the gist with it, right? It gets priority as well with Ice Shard. And it gives me Dark typing, which is something that I kind of wanted to be able to throw at opponents who had powerful Psychic types and whatnot. Weavile is not the most exciting Pokemon in the draft, but it's, a solid, pretty good one. And for an Ice type that I wanted to pair with Regieleki, and that again maybe could receive coaching from Minshao or something like that, I think Weavile is, at least workable. Up next, what was my next pick? Oh, okay, so I have 2 free agent slots left. I can afford 2 D-tier Pokemon or a C and an untiered. And I have my free D-tier Pokemon left to take. So I was looking at D-tier Pokemon at this point in the draft. I also wasn't thrilled with what was available at C. So I was looking at D-tier Pokemon, and usually D-tier is very bad in this league. Usually there's not much to find there, and it's kind of just a throwaway slot, and I'm happy if it puts in work one of the 8 weeks of the season. Like last season, right? I never did very much with Skiploom, but it was really useful the one time I brought it. And that's, to me, a good result for a D-tier Pokemon. But this season, the D-tier actually had some really interesting options in it. I think it was a stronger D-tier than usual. And looking over it, there were 3 Pokemon in particular that caught my interest. One was Coughing, purely because so many people were drafting Pokemon with abilities like Storm Drain and Dry Skin. But the problem with Coughing is you get the neutralizing gas, but then you have a Coughing sitting on the field. I couldn't really figure out what else I would do with it. I was also interested in Linoone because it gets the combination of Belly Drum and Extreme Speed. It's not very strong, but it does have dynamic offense in that specific way, which is more that can be said for big damage for a lot of what else was available in C and D. And the last Pokemon I was interested in for the D-tier slot, and the one that I ended up taking was Oh, whoops. I forgot I drafted Togepi before Purloin. Well, I'll leave that error in now. Yeah, whoops, I forgot about Togepi. It's even in the thumbnail, I think. Togetic was C tier, which I thought was a little bit high for it, and Togekiss was, I don't know, way out of my budget. But also, I think both of them have been drafted already at this point. Togepi gives me Follow Me, but it also gives me one of the lowest speed stats in the game. So mainly I drafted this with an eye to throwing it at opposing Trick Room teams. With options like Charm and Yawn to disrupt what they do. Because I don't have a lot of answers to Trick Room on my team. Volcarona is good into some specific compositions, but it's not a Trick Room answer broadly. Bulky setup Alchemy is something, but that means I'm investing a lot of resources into Alchemy, which might not be necessarily valuable at the power level of this format. So I figured I needed something slow and disruptive into Trick Room, and that's the, although people noticed Follow Me right away in the draft discussion, that's the actual main reason I drafted Togepi. Follow Me is nice to have as well. I have 2 Rage Powder users already, but some things are immune to that. Nothing except Duraludon is immune to, and Barraskewda is immune to Follow Me. And Inteleon if it's using Snipe Shot specifically, but I don't think anyone drafted Inteleon. So Follow Me is also very good, but the actual main reason I drafted Togepi was to have a super slow disruptive Pokemon into Trick Room. And then we can talk about Purloin. Purloin also is a very weak but useful support Pokemon. Liepard had been drafted already at this point. Purloin gets Prankster, and it has a decent number of options to use with it that made it, in my opinion, worth taking over the other options. I was considering Coughing and Linoon for this D tier slot. Purloin, what does it do? I mean, it has so many. I scrolled through a lot of its support options. I still haven't committed a lot of them to memory, but get like Prankster Thunder Wave, Prankster Taunt. I think it gets Torment. Certainly gets Prankster Rain Dance, which could be very valuable into weather teams. Right? Blastoise likes having Rain Up anyway, and if I can disrupt yes, there are Sun, Sand, and Snow. Not Snow, Hail. It's Gen 8. When we go through the rest of the teams, we'll see Sun, Sand, and Hail all represented. So Purloin could be useful for that. It also gets Copycat, Prankster Copycat. So, I mean, I don't have a Trick Room team. I can't do the Max Guard Copycat Trick Room setup, but there might be some other things that I can do with Copycat as the season goes on. I'll see if I can find something fun. Having priority on just about any move, but with very specific positioning to make it work, is definitely something interesting to think about. I think Purloin will be fun. And while Tangela probably wants the Eviolite, Purloin isn't going to be bulky anyway, even with it. Probably wants the Focus Sash a lot of the time. And I'm probably not bringing all of Tangela, Togepi, and Purloin to the same set, so loading up on unevolved Pokemon is fine. 1 free agent slot left, and 30 points to spend on it, the equivalent of a C-tier Pokemon. And I did look at a lot of C-tier options. I don't even remember now what some of them were, but there were some really interesting synergies that I found, especially with Pokemon like Blastoise, enabling certain other teammates to shine. I'm not going to get into it now because I think there's a real chance that at some point after the season starts, I'll make a trade and pick one of these Pokemon up. But there were some really cool options I looked at, just none that I thought were quite all the way convincing. And again, I was thinking about how to get big damage throughout the roster, given that I drafted Blastoise first. And none of the C-tier Pokemon really delivered that big damage potential. So I actually did also take Linoon after Purloin. This is, I think, my first time in this league not spending my entire points budget. But I can still use those 5 points in a trade after the draft. And like I said, I think there is actually a good chance that I'll swap Linoon out for one of the C-tier Pokemon I was looking at. But we'll give Linoon a shot first. Like I said, Belly Drum, Extreme Speed. Not amazing coverage, but some options. I have 3 Redirectors. I might as well have a Pokemon that tries to take advantage of that right away. I probably would have drafted Snorlax from the C tier, but it was already taken by this point. We'll see if Linoon can do something. It also has a little bit in terms of support options that could be interesting, but we'll see how that turns out. And finally, of course, you know what my last pick was already. It was Regieleki. This is Gen 8 Transistor. It's, I think, a 1.5 boost instead of 1.3. I think that's correct. Those are the right numbers. So Regieleki, even though it only has base 100s in both of its attacking stats, it still hits very hard with electric-type attacks. It is a strong Dynamax attacker. I don't know how much I can make use of that, given that Blastoise probably wants to max in most of my games, but having the option to Dynamax Regieleki is certainly powerful. It is the fastest Pokemon in the game, and like I said, it can support its teammates with moves like Electro Web and Max Airstream. and make Pokemon like Weavile and Zygarde go turbo fast as well. Because they're already very fast, they just might need that little bit more in some matchups, and Regieleki is able to deliver it. And Regieleki is also able to set screens more quickly than anything in the game except Prankster users. And I think screens with Blastoise, or even Volcarona, could be extremely powerful. Overall, I don't actually know how I feel about this team. Sometimes I look over it and it feels like kind of just a mishmash of Pokemon that I'm not sure will really hold up super well over the course of the season. But I think I've done okay at assembling a lot of threats. It's just a question of how I use them now. And I think it's not the most layered draft ever, but I think I have some layers, right? And that I can go Turbo, Regieleki, Zygarde, Weavile, offense. I can use Regieleki to run support for tanky Blastoise or set up Volcarona. I have a few different ways I can use this draft, but we'll see how it pans out in the end. I'm not like filled with confidence going into this season, but I don't think I'm going to completely bomb it either. I'm always a little nervous until I get the first win, though, so we'll see how I feel after that. Finally, I thought about splitting this video because I had a feeling I would go long on my own recap, but the people have been clamoring for it, so we'll just include here the part where I look at and talk about the other 15 teams that have been drafted here, but I might keep it a little bit quick. But I've been asked to the PDL Discord a few times now when this is going to come out, so let's not keep them waiting. Up first, we have the Ontario, I don't know how to say this, nor do I know what it means, but we have Ontario here. This is, of course, the same coach as last season's Ontario Minchinos, which was a very, very scary team that dominated the regular season, and then, I don't know, something happened to them in the quarterfinals. This team got the first overall pick this season and took Rapid Strike Urshifu, and then complemented that with Heatran, Jellicent, Alolan Raichu, Crobat, Aegislash, Pelipper, Pincurchin, Slurpuff, Heracross, and Minchino. So I don't completely understand the game plans for this team, but I think a lot of it is fairly straightforward. They have a strong rain option, right, with the Pelipper and the Urshifu. Urshifu is going to hit extremely hard. They have access to Gigantamax Rapid Strike Urshifu, and I don't remember what that one does, but I do remember that Urshifu is a Pokemon you don't want to max most of the time, so we'll see what use they make of that, if any. But obviously it hits massively hard in rain. They also can throw off Thunder with Pokemon like Raichu and Pincurchin. Having the Electric Train from Pincurchin means that they can make Raichu go turbo fast with Surge Surfer. There's something that can outspeed my Regieleki, I'm fairly sure. They also have Unburden. I think Slurpuff gets Unburden, so they could run that with an Electric Seed. They have a decent defensive backbone. Heatran and Jellicent are a good bulky duo. Heatran nicely complements all the water types that they have, and Jellicent is a water type that they have. And I can set Trick Room too, I think. But also, I wouldn't be surprised if it hits reasonably hard in rain, though not out of rain. Crobat is fast and gives them some support options. Aegislash is just a really strong Pokemon, hard to remove. Slurpuff gets Belly Drum. Heracross is a good fighting type attacker. There's a lot of just... What I see here, we'll figure out the synergies as the season plays out. What I see here is a lot of just good Pokemon, but there are definitely some really scary combos, like, again, I'll shout out Pelipper and Urshifu, making those Surging Strikes hit massively hard. Raichu, Pincurchin, making the Raichu go massively fast, and I think they can do that with the Slurpuff as well. And Heatran and Jellicent just being a really difficult bulky duo to remove. Trio, if you want to include the Aegislash. As always, I featured a Pokemon at the bottom that that caught my interest, where I just want to see what it'll do throughout the season, and for this team, it is the Alolan Raichu. Alolan Raichu it's kind of like Electrode in that it's a super fast electric type that feels to me like it should be better in VGC than it is. I always think that Alolan Raichu should be able to put in a lot of work. It doesn't always quite deliver. But in Draft League, it should be a lot of fun. Also, because this is Gen 8, I'm pretty sure Raichu and Pincurchin both get Rising Voltage. That move it's an special electric type attack that gets an extra power up in electric terrain on top of just being electric type attacks generally powered up. Rising Voltage specifically gets way stronger, kind of like Expanding Force in Psychic terrain, except it doesn't become a spread move. And in Scarlet and Violet, only Raging Bolt gets Rising Voltage, so you don't tend to see it, because Raging Bolt doesn't tend to be run on teams with electric terrain. But it was more widely distributed in Sword and Shield. I don't know why they undid that. I believe Raichu and Pincurchin will both get it, and so they'll be able to take advantage of the electric terrain in that way. Up next, we have the Grounded Punching Bags. This is a pretty scary looking sand team. They have my Nightmare, Credilli, which genuinely is a giant threat to a lot of my team. I did make sure to build in some offensive coverage into it with Mienshao and Weavile, but it still kind of scares me. This is the Pokemon that's going to haunt me if I play it this season. I don't remember the schedule well enough off the top of my head to be sure whether I do. Otherwise, they have a pretty strong sand team here. Dracozolt gets Sand Rush. I think Lycanroc does as well in this generation. I don't think it gained that in Scarlet and Violet, although honestly I'm not 100% sure. And Hippowdon, of course, as a tanky sand setter is pretty useful. Credilli also can benefit from the Rock-type special defense boosted stand, given that it's a bulky Pokemon that wants to sit on the field for quite a while. They can complement... Yeah, I'd say Dracozolt is the main offensive piece here. It gets Hustle, and remember, if you Dynamax a Pokemon with Hustle, it gets the power boost, but not the accuracy drop, because max moves can't miss. That's why Durant had a lot of success in early Sword and Shield tournaments, and why Dracozolt would pop up sometimes. So Dracozolt is their main Dynamax threat. It's massively powerful. And then they have it complemented offensively by Pokemon like, not just Lycanroc, but also Azumarill, which gives you that Water and Fairy typing and is a setup threat with Belly Drum, while at the same time Dracozolt is a massive immediate offense threat. They have a special Fairy type in the Gardevoir, which I could see running offensive sets and complementing the Dracozolt. They don't have a ton of special offense beyond that, but there's a lot they can work with here. Grimmsnarl, of course, is a super strong support Pokemon. It can give them speed control, it can give them screens, it can make the Dynamax Dracozolt or the Hippowdon that much harder to remove. I'm not necessarily sure. I'm not necessarily sold on some of these other Pokemon. Like, I don't know what Wobbuffet brings to the table. I think they probably were just drafting the mascot there, although it does get Shadow Tag, so it could make for some... Actually, Wobbuffet could make for some awkward positions just by sitting on the field while Pokemon like Azumarill and Dracozolt go to work. Make it impossible for opponents to pivot out. That might be a plausible role for it. Kangaskhan, I think it's probably not that strong, but it does get scrappy. Stonjourner... I mean, Stonjourner is nice because Power Spot with a massively threatening attacker like Azumarill or Dracozolt probably goes pretty crazy. I think they've already traded Cursula away, so I'm not going to worry about that one. But it's an interesting team for sure. Next we have the Nothing Burger. This team is crazy. I'm not looking forward to playing this team. If I do play it, I don't remember the schedule. But I am looking forward to watching it play everyone else. This team is... I mean, how do you even... Their first three picks were Ditto, which can transform into just about anything. Silvally, which is, you know, low-budget Arceus, able to change its type. It's not as flexible as Arceus in terms of the roles that it can play, and it certainly doesn't have the stats, but it's a Pokemon that you never know what you're going to get with it. And Mew, which gets the widest move pool of anything not named Smeargle, and Smeargle isn't in this game. So you never know what you're getting with Mew either. This is a crazy, unpredictable team. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think, for the coach to play. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch week by week. But how do you even prep for this? Then they have Corviknight, which is, you know, strong bulk up Pokemon or something like that. They have a lot of good bulky Pokemon in the Corviknight, the Slowbro, the Snorlax. They obviously have a pretty good Trick Room mode with Slowbro, Runerigus. They get access to Gigantamax Snorlax, which is extremely threatening because it can use Belly Drum, eat a Figgy Berry with Gluttony, getting the berry early, and then use Gmax Replenish to potentially get the berry back. They also have another super strong normal type attacker in Diggersby, which of course gets Sword Stance and huge power. Does Diggersby get Belly Drum? I'm not sure. I guess some priority too with Quick Attack. And then I think, yeah, they've just got like some strong Pokemon complementing that, like Hydreigon. They have a great support in Togetic, right? That can hold the Eviolite and click Follow Me and Helping Hand and stuff while being a lot tankier than my Togepi. And then Aron, I think, is just a cheese Pokemon, right? You get Sturdy, you get Endeavor. It's an interesting pick for sure, but like I think we know what it does, and I'm not that bothered about it. But yeah, strong Trick Room team with Slowbro, Runerigus, Snorlax. They can play tanky stuff with Corviknight. They have offense from Pokemon like Diggersby. Togetic is a great support for all that. And then just who knows any given week what Ditto, Silvally, and Mew are doing. That is a crazy trio to start the draft with. It's going to be so much fun to watch. And Silvally is the featured Pokemon down here. But really, I could have put all three of them down there. But, you know, Silvally isn't even in Scarlet and Violet. When's the last time you saw one? Gonna be interesting. I meant to shout out Gigantamax Pokemon because I didn't end up marking them in the image, but I think most teams have at least one or two. This team can Gmax or Shifu. Is there any Gmax Pokemon on this team? Oh yeah, Grimmsnarl. This one gets Corviknight and Snorlax. And then next we have Pendragon United returning to the league. Very strong coach from last season. Got to the semifinals, looking to go all the way here. And this one has access to Gigantamax Charizard. This is a massively threatening Sun team. And by the way, pick your chlorophyll user. They have 3 different ones. But obviously, Gigantamax Charizard is one of the strongest Pokemon in Sword and Shield. It was going crazy in the actual VGC 2022 format on that Rinya Sun team. It hits enormously hard with Gmax Wildfire boosted by Solar Power in Sun. And then, of course, it does that residual damage to everything other than Fire types for a while afterward. Looks like something went a little bit wrong when I moved the sprites, but no big deal. Ninetales is here to set the sun for it. Garchomp gives it a complementary, powerful physical attacker, with Charizard being immune to Garchomp's Earthquakes. Raichu has Lightning Rod to protect it from electric-type attacks, while also giving it support in the form of things like Fake Out and Electroweb. Charizard's water weakness, by the way, is kind of covered by being in the sun, so Raichu covering the electric weakness. That just leaves the big double weakness to rock, but I mean, Charizard did run the Charty Berry, that's the Rock Resist Berry, at times in VGC 2022. And this coach has already strongly suggested that will be coming in this draft league. You also have Garchomp resisting Rock and immune to Electric, able to switch in if you don't want to Gigantamax right away. Pheromosa is one of the fastest Pokemon in the game. It is faster than, I believe, faster than Zeraora and slower than Regieleki, so one of the Pokemon I had in mind when I committed to the Regieleki plan. It hits very hard on both sides of the spectrum. It has more coverage than you might expect. It also gets speed swap, so it can make Charizard go turbo fast, or, you know, Garchomp or somebody if you want. But I would not be surprised to see that this season. Tapu Lele and Exeggutor is an interesting duo. I assume Exeggutor gets Expanding Force in this game. It does in Scarlet and Violet. So Tapu Lele able to set the Psychic Terrain for that, while also being fairly threatening in its own right because it sets that Psychic Terrain. It has a pretty good special attack stat. A whole other offensive layer that you need to worry about beyond just the Charizard or Garchomp stuff. But if Exeggutor isn't the most suitable Chlorophyll Pokemon for a matchup, you get a physical one in Leafeon, or you get a support-oriented one in Vileplume. All of those are available to this team. Scraggy, of course, has Intimidate. It has Fake Out. It probably has Coaching. I know it does in Scarlet and Violet, where it had a little bit of VGC success in, I think, Thailand. And Scraggy is pretty comfy using the Eviolite on this team because the only other contender for that slot is Shellos, which, you know, a lot of Sun teams in Sword and Shield use Gastrodon. Gastrodon is not available to this draft, but Shellos is still here with the Storm Drain to also help protect Charizard, Ninetales, and friends from water-type attacks. I'm not super sold on Shellos. It is a lot weaker than Gastrodon, and it doesn't have the ground typing. But I wouldn't be surprised if this coach makes good use of it. And by the way, teams with Lightning Rod and Storm Drain both are pretty scary to my draft. This is not the only one that we'll see. But yeah, when so much of my team is built around Regieleki and Blastoise, this is going to be a tricky matchup if and when it comes. But they have a bunch of layers to this team, but of course the biggest thing is Charizard, Ninetales, Garchomp, and 3 different Chlorophyll users. That's already going to be hard for a lot of opponents to deal with, and I'm looking forward to seeing Gigantamax Charizard go crazy. Just not against me, please. Next we have the Windsor Whiscash. This is another team with Lightning Rod and... oh, they don't have Storm Drain, do they? They do, they have Gastrodon. This is the other team with Lightning Rod and Storm Drain that I was thinking about. This is actually my week 1 opponent, so I'm already thinking about this matchup, and honestly, it's it's a tough one. Week 1's going to be not the easiest for sure. Galarian Moltres gets the feature slot here because this coach was very happy to draft it in the first round. It seems like they really think they can cook with it. I think Galarian Moltres is a good Pokemon, but I was surprised to see it go in the first round. But this coach seems very confident with it, so we'll see what they cook up. The rest of this team, I don't entirely understand, if I'm being honest. There are some strong Pokemon here for sure. Barraskewda is super fast. It is frail, but it can hit hard. And it is one of only 2 Pokemon with a full immunity to redirection if you give it the Propeller Tail ability. Also, I'm sure it gets Surf, because a lot of water types get Surf, so you can do Surf into Gastrodon stuff like I did at times last season. They have the Fire, Water, Grass core, right? They have Blaziken, a strong fire type that, you know, I was thinking about drafting for a while. I think it's probably pretty good here. They have Lurantis. Sableye is a massively disruptive Pokemon, right? It can set screens with priority. It gets priority Will-O-Wisp, Thunder Wave. It gets Quash, which not many Pokemon get. So Sableye can boost Quash with Prankster, go first in a turn, and force another Pokemon to go last. So if they have strong offense coming out with like Nasty Plot Moltres, or boosted Gastrodon, or Swords Dance Blaziken, or Toxicroak or something, Sableye can basically make the opponent's answers to those too slow to be effective. For Gigantamax Pokemon, they have Pikachu. Pikachu is actually not a bad G-Max Pokemon, right? Because it's, what is its max move? G-Max Volt Crash, I think? It paralyzes, which is super strong for speed control. And Pikachu is not very bulky, but Gigantamax Pokemon double their HP. They're kind of inherently hard to remove. But Pikachu also can just go crazy as an attacker with the Light Ball, complementing the Fire, Water, Grass. They have multiple water types, obviously. They also have Gastrodon. They have the Whiscash, which, you know, Whiscash as a setup attacker is not the worst thing. I do think that I don't completely see the vision for this team. Like, I don't see that core synergy that really scares me. Like, this team is great for a core synergy that really scares me. Charizard, Ninetales, Garchomp, throw in Exeggutor or something, and it's going to be really hard to deal with. This team, I'm not saying it's weak, and I'm not saying it's easy to deal with. I'm just saying I don't see that core game plan that worries me immediately to the same extent. But again, this is my week 1 opponent, so maybe I'm about to find out. Tune in next week to see. And it is a strong group of Pokemon for sure. Sableye can open up a lot of opportunities for these Pokemon, and Pikachu for speed control is actually pretty good. I don't know what Grapple Lock does. I'm going to have to look into that when I'm preparing for this matchup. That's why I'm not talking about it. I genuinely just don't know what that Pokemon does. I don't really know what Snorunt does here either. But I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with the Galarian Moltres, because they seem, like I said, very excited to be using it. Next we have the Dreamyard Darkrais. This is a coach who enjoys their Dark-type Pokemon. They were talking in the Discord. This is a coach who, in a previous season, drafted 6 Dark-types, and they were talking in the Discord this time about how they only managed to get 5. They'll have to fix that later, maybe. Darkrai is a fun mythical Pokemon. Dark Void is kind of nuts. I don't know if anything on this team gets Gravity. I think Behem probably gets Gravity, but it's not super fast and doesn't have priority, so I'm not sure how useful it's going to be as a Gravity setter. But if I had to guess off the top of my head without doing any research, is there a Pokemon on this team that gets Gravity? I think probably just Behem. Maybe Azulf does, but I wouldn't bet on it. But Dark Void is a 50-50 into 2 targets. I mean, that's still going to be effective a lot of the time. And Darkrai is fast and strong. You can complement it with Lucario. You can bluff it with Zoroark. This coach has made interesting use of Zoroark in past seasons, and I could see Zoroark. It's a little tricky because of the shared typing, but I could see Zoroark disguised as Darkrai, you know, baiting out people's answers and then creating openings for the real Darkrai later in the game. Behem, I'm pretty sure, can set Trick Room. They can go Trick Room offense with Pokemon like Pangoro and Aggron. They have the Rain option with Politoed, so they can set that up to boost the Hurricane on Therian Tornadus. This is Sword and Shield, so Bleak Wind Storm doesn't exist yet. That move was invented in Legends Arceus. But Hurricane is still very strong, and Therian Tornadus is faster and bulkier than the Incarnate form. You don't usually see it in VGC because Prankster is just that valuable to Tornadus. This Tornadus will not be setting priority Tailwind, but it is still able to set Tailwind. It is pretty fast. I don't remember its speed stat. They also have Perish Song in Politoed, and I think Absol also gets Perish Song, but I don't see any trapping on this team. Maybe something gets like Mean Look or something, but there's certainly no Shadow Tag. But Pokemon like Obstagoon is pretty strong. I think it gets Guts. I think it can play nicely in Trick Room, the Behem. They have, you know, decent complementary coverage in Pokemon like Darkrai, Lucario, and Azulf. I think the Zoroark bluffs are going to be really interesting with this team. I could have put Zoroark down here. It's going to be a Pokemon to keep an eye on for sure. And the Tornadus is going to be strong. But I'm looking forward to seeing a mythical Pokemon try to pop off here and see what Darkrai can do. Next we have the Edmonton Empoleons. This is kind of a secret hidden Sun team. There's no Drought user, but they have Riolu, which I believe gets priority Sunny Day with its Prankster ability. They have Venusaur, and they have Moltres for a Fire type. Otherwise, they just have like a good, well-rounded mix of Pokemon here. Gigantamax Venusaur, much like Gigantamax, Charizard, and Blastoise, goes crazy. I actually only realized after Venusaur was drafted that I think Venusaur was S tier, but of course since Blastoise was only A, I actually could have taken both Venusaur and Blastoise, and that would have had a lot of synergy. Those two Pokemon complement each other really well, go figure, and also I could choose matchup by matchup which one I maxed. That's something I didn't talk about in the draft because I actually wasn't thinking about it until after Venusaur was already taken. I was busy thinking about Shaman or whatever, and then I went, oh, I could have gotten Swamp Combo too. But instead, Gigantamax Venusaur is on this team. And that G-Max Vine Lash is going to be a problem. So is the Sleep Powder, especially with Riolu giving it some speed control. They have, of course, the best Follow Me user in the game in Togekiss. They can also pair it with Crocodile, or they can pair Crocodile with any of their other flying types. They also have Swoobat and Moltres, and throw off those strong Earthquakes. Swoobat notably gets Simple Beam, so they can give the ability Simple to their... Oh, wait, you can't have Simple and Moxie at the same time. I was going to say double up the Moxie boost, but obviously you only get one ability at a time, so if you have Simple, you don't have Moxie. Never mind, they can't do that. But they can do Coaching with Riolu into Crocodile, or Darmanitan. This is where Galarian Darmanitan ended up. Or Kingler, which is a tanky physical attacker with a G-Max move that lowers the opponent's speed. They have a lot of good coaching targets for Riolu, and all that complemented by the Venusaur is a powerful special threat, and the Moltres to an extent, especially if you set up Sun. Also, they have a massively powerful special attacker named Regidrago. So, I don't necessarily know what the Steelix is for, although I could see it just sitting there forever in some matchups. Maybe setting up with, like, Curse, or if it gets that. Like an Earthquake next to Togekiss. But mostly, this team just has a lot of powerful offensive threats, and it's going to be hard for opponents to cover all of them. The Kingler is down here because G-Max Kingler is a fun one. I hope to see it put in some work over the course of the season. I also hope to see Bergmite at some point, but I have absolutely no idea what that's here to do. But yeah, even just Prankster coaching Riolu with Crocodile, Kingler, Darmanitan, all complemented by Togekiss for support, or Venusaur, Regidrago, and Moltres for special offense. That's actually going to be a really strong team. Next we have the East Coast Espurr. This is the team I'm most afraid of, to the point where during the draft I think I got tunnel visioned into thinking about responses to this coach's draft while not necessarily accounting for all of the others to an extent. Perhaps that's how I ended up with bad matchups. Well, matchups that I'm worried about into teams like the Whiscash, but this is the coach who got Colossal from the B tier. Gigantamax Colossal from the B tier in round 1. Nobody get on my case for not doing that because this happened before my pick. They also have Rillaboom for another G-Max Pokemon. But anyway, you activate Colossal with a weak Surf or a weak Aqua Jet. They have Primarina right here for the weak Aqua Jet, so that's probably how they'll do it. And of course you can get the weakness policy and the steam engine in one go, so you max out Colossal speed, you get the boost to attack and special attack, you Gigantamax, and G-Max Volcalith works like G-Max Wildfire and Cannonade and all those others, does residual damage each turn to non-rock types. If you're at all familiar with Sword and Shield VGC, you probably know how this works. Wolf Blick made a lot of use of it, and he wasn't the only one. I believe Santino Tarquinio won the first Players' Cup with a very similar team to the one that Wolf used to win the second one. Colossal in B tier is just crazy, and it means that they were able to draft a lot of threats with a lot of layers to them around it as well. So Rillaboom and Primarina give them a Fire, Water, Grass core, right? Rillaboom helps keep Colossal healthy. It gets Fake Out, it gets Grassy Surge, it gets Grassy Glide to threaten the water types that otherwise are massively threatening to Colossal. Primarina not only completes that core, not only gives him another strong attacker, some water type, special attacker to complement Rillaboom's physical attacker, it also gives them the Swamp Pledge combo if they want it, because they have grass and water type starters, and Primarina using its special attack for the pledge will make the pledge hit very hard to begin with. It also gets Perish Song, and they have Gothitelle, so they can also run Perish Trap. I think Alolan Marowak also gets Perish Song. So already there are a ton of layers to this team right off the bat. Then you have Klefki, which is Prankster screen support that's hard to remove from the field with that Steel and Fairy typing. Get some other support options as well, like I think it gets Metal Sound, which will create a lot of openings for special attacking Colossal, or another fast special attacker like maybe the Spectre right here. which can snowball with Grimnay once Klefki has created openings for it. Klefki also gets Thunder Wave. It gets some weather control options. I think they were kind of just... I think after these 5, they were kind of just drafting strong Pokemon. Again, I think Alolan Marowak gets Perish Song, but it's also just an amazing physical Trick Room attacker with a thick club. And you can run Lightning Rod to be immune to Electric, or I think it gets Rockhead. Or no recoil Flare Blitz. This doesn't even look like much of a Trick Room team. Actually, Gothitelle can set Trick Room. Maybe Aromatisse can. I don't know what Aromatisse does. But yeah, so yeah, actually just with Gothitelle, they don't even need to use it for trapping. They also have a Perish, or not a Perish mode. They do have a Perish mode. They also have a Trick Room mode with the Marowak. Ferrothorn is just very bulky and hard to remove. It can set up with Iron Defense. Rillaboom can help keep it healthy. Klefki can help keep it healthy. Gothitelle can help keep it healthy. So they have that bulky, tanky game plan if they don't want to go fast offense or slow offense or Perish Trap. I don't know what Aromatisse does, but it's a fairy type with a lot of support options, so I'm sure it's pretty good. Scrafty gives them Intimidate, Fake Out, a lot of the same stuff as Scraggy. And then Espurr, I think, is just a favorite Pokemon / mascot pick. But if I'm being honest right now, going into the season, this is my favorite to win the championship. And this is the team that I'm most afraid of for sure. There are so many powerful layers piled on top of each other. I think I might want to try to learn how to... I might want to study this draft and try to learn how to draft like this, coach. Just a quick recap. Primarina enabling Colossal to set up and go crazy with Gmax Volcalith. Rillaboom complementing Primarina and Colossal in that Fire, Water, Grass core, doing a lot, especially with the priority Grassy Glide before the Scarlet and Violet power nerf to protect Colossal from water types. Klefki setting screens and speed control and stuff for everyone, or Klefki, I think it gets Metal Sound, I could be mistaken, creating openings for fast special attackers like Colossal and Spectre to go crazy. Rillaboom and Primarina can set up the Pledge combo for speed control, or they can run a Trick Room mode with Gothitelle and Marowak. Ferrothorn's also very slow. Bulky Ferrothorn setup can be enabled by Pokemon like Rillaboom and Klefki, as well as just offensive threats like Spectre. They have Perish Trap with Primarina, Gothitelle, I think Marowak gets Perish Song, and that's not even mentioning the generally good support Pokemon in Aromatisse and Scrafty. This team is terrifying, to say the least, and we're going to see Colossal put in work for sure. But there are more teams to go through. Next is the Elegancy. And this is a serious Trick Room team right there. There are 2 teams that I would describe as hard Trick Room in this draft, and this is the first one. Pretty hard Trick Room, at least. They have Hatterene, Escavalier, Oranguru, Chandelure, all massive Trick Room threats. Incineroar, as obviously one of the best support Pokemon of all time, can help them create openings to set Trick Room. So can Luxray with Intimidate and Snarl, disrupting the opponents, or they can use it for speed control if they want to go faster. Something like Nidoking can be used in a faster offensive mode, but I think Nidoking's a little faster Trick Room, but if other teams are going turbo fast, Nidoking could probably play in Trick Room as well. Throw is just like a decent, bulky fighting type. Klinklang, oh, they can go fast with Klinklang. It can set up with Shift Gear. Liepard is Prankster support with basically all the same options as Purloin, but a little bit more in terms of stats, and they do have access to the tech that I talked about earlier, where they can they can Dynamax a Trick Room setter. If they're having trouble getting Trick Room set up safely, they can Dynamax a Trick Room setter, either Hatterene or Chandelure, and click Trick Room. And because they're Dynamaxed, it will turn into Max Guard. All non-damaging moves turn into Max Guard when you're Dynamaxed. And it will move with priority and protect the Pokemon from any damage. And then on the next turn, they can click Priority Copycat with Liepard, and it will copy... Oh, no, it's the same turn, right? It has to be. Maybe I don't remember exactly how the timing of this works. I think it has to be the same turn because of all the priority involved. Priority Copycat with Liepard copies the last move used, but it can't copy max moves, it copies the underlying moves. So if you use Max Guard off of Trick Room, then Liepard will use Trick Room with Copycat, and you get priority Trick Room that way. So they have that option available, plus all of Liepard's other incredible support kit. But they might not even need to do that, because they have Incineroar enabling the Trick Room setup. Hatterene is one of the best Trick Room attackers in Sword and Shield. Chandelure is very strong. Escavalier is very strong. Toxapex, I'm not that sold on, but I don't know. It's a bulky support Pokemon. It probably gets Wide Guard. I think it gets Wide Guard. But the one down here is Oranguru, because I personally always find Oranguru very hard to play against. It's probably the Pokemon that's closest to frustrating me, like Smeargle and Xerneas frustrate Wolfglick, because I didn't play VGC with Dark Void Smeargle or in a format where Xerneas was good, but I don't know, I just find Instruct in Trick Room really hard to play around. There's maybe just a weakness in my game, but Oranguru is kind of a nightmare Pokemon for me, so I'm not looking forward to potentially running into it. Next we have Team Staff United. The first team I think I've ever seen in the PDL with 3 different coaches, all of them members of the league staff who are too busy in their offline lives right now to carry a team alone, so they all banded together. Gonna be interesting to see how they, all get on the same page. Actually, funnily enough, the staff were often the ones slowing down the draft because the 3 of them had to discuss what their picks would be. And they ended up with an interesting team. Regigigas, Weezing, Nihilego, Meowstic, Sylveon, Buzzwole, Butterfree, Dragapult, Wishiwashi, Trapinch, and Thwackey. Obviously, they have the immediate threat of Regigigas and Weezing, which is not amazing in Scarlet and Violet, but it's actually very good in Sword and Shield because, of course, Regigigas can Dynamax. And it's already a strong, tanky Pokemon to begin with, but you give it that HP boost and that power boost on its moves. And, of course, it uses Max Strike, which lowers opponent's speed as it stabs, so it gets speed control as well as being a tanky, powerful attacker. You have to make the most of those 3 turns, but Dynamax Regigigas next to Weezing is actually very good in Sword and Shield. They have priority support in Meowstic. They have Sylveon as a strong special attacker that threatens the fighting types, threaten Regigigas. And then a lot of just really cool Pokemon, right? They have Dragapult as a fast attacker that's hard to deal with, or a fast support. Sometimes in Sword and Shield, Dragapult runs like Screens, Breaking Swipe, Will-O-Wisp. We could certainly see those things to enable a Regigigas or Sylveon or Buzzwole mode. Buzzwole, again, is a Pokemon that I thought about for a while in the draft. And part of the reason I passed on it is that it has a double weakness to the strongest move, the best move in the format, Max Airstream. But if you position it well, I can see it putting in some work. Do they have Trick Room on this team? I think Meowstic gets Trick Room. But of course, Prankster doesn't do much for Trick Room. It bumps the priority up from -7 to -6. So Meowstic would have to take a hit. I think more likely Trapinch is here as an anti-Trick Room Pokemon. It's slower than just about anything. It has base 100 attack, actually the same as Flygon, and Arena Trap, so opponents can't pivot out. I don't know, but I wonder whether the Trapinch pick was kind of motivated similarly to my Togepi pick, looking for something very slow that can be disruptive to an opponent's Trick Room mode. I don't really know what Wishiwashi does, but hey, it gives them a water type. Those are good. Thwackey gives them some terrain control, fake out, priority with Grassy Glide. But I think a lot of the game plans that we'll see for this team will heavily feature the Regigigas, maybe the Sylveon, maybe the Buzzwole. River Dance Butterfree is always possible as well, or you could use Butterfree as just like a Focus Sash, Tailwind, Sleep Powder support. But I've put Gigantamax Butterfree down here because it's a very pretty Gigantamax form, and Gmax Befuddle is kind of the original Dire Claw, so it'll be a lot of fun to see if that goes crazy. But I think some of the synergies for this team are not as obvious to me as some of the others, and I'll have to watch a couple of sets to see exactly how pieces like Regigigas, Nihilego, and Buzzwole and Dragapult fit together. Next we have Ryangreenblue. This team does have a logo, but it looks like a QR code, and I don't care to find out what, if anything, is going on with that. This is the other hard Trick Room team that I talked about. They did take one of the best Trick Room setters in Mimikyu. They also took another of the best Trick Room setters in Stakataka, and arguably another of the best Trick Room setters in Bronzong. So they are set for setters. I didn't even mention Magearna yet. If Magearna can set its own Trick Room in this game, which I think it probably can. It can with Scarlet and Violet. Magearna obviously is a crazy strong Trick Room Pokemon. It is a little bit awkward in that it's faster than a lot of other Trick Room attackers, so you do have to position it somewhat carefully, but it has that amazing Steel and Fairy typing, and it has a broken ability in Soul Heart. I've talked about other Ultra Beasts in... what am I talking about Ultra Beasts? Oh yeah, Ultra Beasts get a stat boost if they KO a target. Spectre gets a stat boost if it KOs a target, so does Glastrier. Magearna gets a boost to its special attack whenever if it's on the field and another Pokemon faints. Magearna doesn't have to be involved in the KO, and it doesn't matter what side the other Pokemon is on. Anything faints, Magearna gets a special attack boost. If you watched my Magearna videos recently, you've seen me activate it with Explosion, Final Gambit, even Perish Song. Sometimes knocking out my own Pokemon, sometimes knocking out opposing Pokemon, ideally doing both. Magearna gets a boost either way for every single Pokemon that faints. And then it hits hard with, Fleur Cannon, Dazzling Gleam, Flash Cannon, and actually Magearna is not as awkwardly positioned in this format because you can Dynamax it, and then it has a little bit more staying power, even if its speed tier is a little bit awkward. Mimikyu is an amazing Trick Room setter because with Disguise you can never one-shot it, basically. Stakataka is super slow. It can set its own Trick Room, and it can hit very hard on the physical side, especially with Gyro Ball because of how slow it is and the fact that it's a Steel type. Bronzong is a nice support Steel type, hard to remove quickly, sets Trick Room. It gets Levitate, so the ground types that threaten Magearna and Stakataka don't have such an easy time with Bronzong. Then they have some really strong Trick Room attackers in Conkeldurr and Vikavolt. Slow Pokemon, one physical, one special, hit very hard. Vikavolt also gets Levitate. They have bulky support in Blissey. I'm not that sold on Blissey for this team, but it can run like Heal Pulse and stuff, and it's very slow. Actually, yeah, I think Blissey is not an every week bring, but it definitely has a niche, keeping its teammates healthy while they go to town on the opposing team. Melodic is a bulky water that can be hard to deal with. It can set up with Coil and click Hypnosis because Coil boosts its accuracy along with its defense and its attack, but you're probably not using that. You use the defense for staying power and the accuracy for Hypnosis. Or it gets competitive, so it can get a special attack boost if people try to intimidate Pokemon like Conkeldurr and Golurk. Oh yeah, Golurk is also a strong Trick Room attacker. Or Stakataka, which is also a strong physical attacker in Trick Room. Or Mimikyu, which actually hits reasonably hard on the physical side, as well as being a strong Trick Room attacker. So Melodic can deal with something like an Incineroar or Intimidate coming into that and get the competitive boost. I'm not that sold on Skarmory. It is a bulky Steel type, but they have a couple of those already. I'm not really sure what Skarmory is doing on this team, and I'm not sure it will be here for long. But maybe they have some secret plan for it that I haven't figured out. And Mudkip is always a wonderful, adorable Pokemon to see. It has put in work in the PDL in the past, so looking forward to seeing if that'll happen again. But Magearna, Stakataka, Conkeldurr, Vikavolt, Golurk, all enabled by some of the best Trick Room setters in the game. Like 3 or 4 of the best Trick Room setters in the game is gonna be hard to deal with. I'm not sure my Togepi is enough for this one. I might need some other ideas if I play this team. Next we have, this is us, the Toronto Rock Slide. After that, we have Lunala Plaza, featuring female Indeedee, Blacephalon, Araquanid, Carbink, Shedinja, Lapras, Zarude, Noivern, Machamp, Rhydon, and Licky. So the main thing that jumps out at me with this team is the Lapras, because they get Gigantamax Lapras. Its Ice-type attacks set Aurora Veil, no Hail needed. That can immediately make their team bulky, tanky, hard to remove. I believe Carbink can set Trick Room. And I believe Carbink can use whatever that move is called, Guard Split or something. The thing that Shuckle used with Chansey on Cheese teams on the Sword and Shield ladder, where a bulky Pokemon gives its bulk to another Pokemon to make it hard to remove, basically. So Carbink has tools to make Lapras, I think, move before the opponents. I think it gets Trick Room. It also has tools to make Lapras tankier and hard to remove, which is a lot when Lapras is able to set up the Aurora Veil already. Plus you have Zarude with Jungle Healing, able to help keep Lapras healthy. Plus you have Redirection with Indeedee. Female Indeedee does not get Trick Room in Sword and Shield. They gave it to female Indeedee by accident in Scarlet and Violet. Even that was not really what they intended. They just messed up the raids. But Redirection is still strong. You have Araquanid as a Pokemon that can be hard to remove for certain threats and can go crazy in Trick Room. You have a Firewater Grass Core with Blacephalon, Lapras, Zarude, or Blacephalon, Araquanid, Zarude. They also have a Tailwind option with Noivern. Machamp is just a strong Pokemon. It can Gigantamax. I can see it putting in a lot of work under Aurora Veil and appropriate speed control. Rhydon can redirect electric-type attacks away from Lapras, making Lapras that much harder to deal with. Lapras, of course, is also weak to Grass, Rock, and Fighting, but they have switch-ins for all of those. Between Pokemon like Araquanid, Blacephalon, Noivern, even Shedinja in some situations. But yeah, I think Lapras supported by Carbink, Indeedee, and Zarude is the single scariest thing on this team, but they also can go turbo fast offense, right? Noivern is a fast Tailwind setter, and it gets Telepathy, so you can run that with Blacephalon and click Mind Blown, and you'll damage your own Blacephalon, but not your Noivern. This coach was really talking up Explosion Licky in the Discord, so I could have put Licky down here because they seem to be a big believer in it, but Blacephalon also, of course, is an Ultra Beast, so And it's a fast offensive one, so it can use Beast Boost to boost its offense, and you can run Indeedee Redirection to give it openings to do that. Or Blacephalon can maybe, it's not very bulky, but it can maybe go crazy in Aurora Veil. So there's some pretty clear synergies for this team that I do think are going to be hard to deal with. And it's going to be interesting to watch this team because the way that it plays is so different from anything you see in Scarlet and Violet. And because they have a mythical Pokemon in Zarude, and I'm looking forward to seeing if that puts in work. That said, I've put Shedinja down here because, speaking of different from Scarlet and Violet, I am not used to having to think about Shedinja. I think Shedinja is going to be a hard Pokemon to pull off in Draft League because your opponents know there's a good chance that you'll bring it, so they can make sure they have a lot prepped. But if it gets into the right positions, it could be a nightmare for some people. Next, we have the Bashful Bisharps. This is the big Hail team of this draft. We've seen Sand with Dracozolt. We've seen Sun with Charizard. Now we get Hail with both Arctozolt and Arctovish, both of which get Slush Rush. And they have those attacks that are powered up if they go first in Bolt Beak and Vicious Rend. There also is another Slush Rush Pokemon here in Alolan Sandslash. So if that Ninetales can get weather control, its teammates can kind of just go crazy. Tapu Koko gives them a fast attacker that doesn't depend on the weather. It also gives them electric terrain to power up the Arctozolt even more. That's the obvious thing that I see with that Pokemon. Celesteela gives them a tanky steel type. What's Celesteela useful for here? Well, they have a number of ground weaknesses. Arctozolt, Tapu Koko, and Terrakion are all weak to ground. But Celesteela can sit in front of ground type attacks no problem. And its own weaknesses... I mean, its electric weakness is pretty well covered by having Arctozolt and Tapu Koko available to switch in. The fire weakness is actually a little bit tougher for this team to deal with, but they have Slowking and Terrakion and Heatmore. It's not that much tougher. They have strong physical attackers in Terrakion and Scizor. Does anything on this team get beat up? I'm not sure. Beat up into Terrakion is very strong because you can stack Justified boosts. I'm not sure whether Ponyard gets beat up. The only other Pokemon that I think might is Scizor. Maybe Heatmore gets it, I don't know. If I play this team, I'll keep an eye out for beat-up users, if we don't see any before then. But, yeah, the Hail jumps out at you right away, but even outside of Hail, of course that depends on their 4 Ice types, and Ice types have a lot of exploitable weaknesses, but even outside of their Hail, right, they have complementary Pokemon like Tapu Koko, Celesteela, Terrakion, Scizor, and can come in on those weaknesses and give them some more layers that are still hard to deal with. Slowking is one of the best Trick Room setters. I'm not sure how much this team can really do with Trick Room. It's more built to go fast, but if you don't have weather control, then Arctozolt and Arctovish can still go crazy with their first move attacks under Trick Room under the right circumstances. So I do think Trick Room does have some value to this team. I'm not sure what Heatmore does, I'll be honest, or Ponyard. I'm not really sure what those Pokemon bring to the table. Ponyard might get Defiant, since Bisharp does. And opponents will be pretty strongly incentivized to bring Intimidate against Arctozolt, Terrakion, Scizor, Sandslash, and Arctovish. Remember, there's no clear amulet in this game. So having answers to Intimidate is valuable. I don't know if Ponyard gets Defiant. I also don't know how hard it hits, even if it does. But obviously the main thing that jumps out at me here is the Hail mode that I keep talking about. And with apologies to Sandslash, especially the duo of Arctozolt and Arctovish. I could have put either one of them here. Arctovish is funny. Its mouth is on top of its head. I don't know how it lived like that in ancient times. And also, when you think Vicious Rend, you usually think Dracovish, because that Pokemon was really well known for abusing that move. But Arctovish gets it too, and I think has the same attack stat. It doesn't get Strong Jaw, but with Slush Rush, it should be a lot of fun to watch. But I could easily have put the Arctozolt down here, because now that I think about it, they also have the Tapu Koko powering it up with the electric terrain. Next we have the Alaskan Absols, coached by, of course, PDL founder Shadow, former commissioner. This is, of course, the team that I took over mid-season in Season 6 when Shadow had to step away for a bit, but here it is again with its rightful coach. This is where Single Striker Shifu shows up, along with Arcanine, Salamence, Gyarados, Gudra, Tapu Bulu, Virizion, Magnezone, Dragalge, Dubwool, and Beldum. I actually was thinking about taking Arcanine as my fire type, and this is why I didn't. It was drafted, I think, it was drafted before even my second round pick. I didn't even have Alchemy yet when Arcanine got drafted, and that's why I pivoted to thinking about Blaziken and Volcarona. Arcanine is a good, tanky, Intimidate, Snarl, Will-O-Wisp, fire type that also can go offensive with its attack stat, extreme speed, even Justified. So it would have been really good to get. It's a good pick by Shadow here. Shadow is loaded up on Intimidate Pokemon. Arcanine is joined by Salamence and Gyarados. So this is where people are going to be needing some Intimidate answers. Again, there's no clear Amulet in this game. I think physical attackers will have a hard time dealing with this team to an extent. There's a Fire, Water, Grass Core, an Arcanine, Gyarados, Tapu Bulu, or Virizion. But again, sort of tried and true, loading up on strong Pokemon with good stats all over the place. Got Double Dragon as well with the Salamence and the Goodra. Salamence more offensive, able to set up with Dragon Dance or run like Choice Scarf Moxie or something, or you can do Intimidate support with it. Goodra able to set up with like Acid Armor or run an Assault Vest and throw off special attacks. Salamence can do special attacks as well, of course. But yeah, mostly looking at this, I don't see like some crazy combo like the Colossal stuff or the Solar Power Charizard or the Hard Trick Room stuff, but I just see a lot of good Pokemon. And that can be hard to deal with in Draft League, because I think a team like this is going to be difficult to prepare for everything they can throw at you. The Magnezone is a strong Electric-type special attacker, complementing the Fire, Water, Grass Core. The Salamence has so many different sets it can run. So does the Goodra. The Gyarados could go more supportive or more offensive. Tapu Bulu can tie things together in a bulky mode with its grassy terrain. Dragalge is another Dragon type that you have to take seriously. Dubwool gets like Cotton Guard and Baton Pass. That's something. And all of that without mentioning the Single Strike Urshifu that obviously is just one of the strongest Pokemon in Sword and Shield. Yeah, this team, like I said, there's no one broken thing that I think this team does, but I think it's going to be really hard to prep for because there's so many different good things that it can do. And it'll just be a question of bringing the right game plan when you really don't know what you're getting back from it. Virizion, likewise, it's hard to pick a Pokemon to put down here when this one looks like it's really going to be a team effort all the way through the season, but Virizion gets a little bit of a nod because I think it's pretty good, even though it's double weak to flying. It's a little bit faster than some of their other Pokemon. I think it gets coaching. Maybe I'm mistaken about that. But they have so many beefy physical attackers like Arcanine, Salamence, Gyarados, Tapu Bulu. I could see Virizion attacking in its own right, or I could see it helping its teammates to be that much more difficult to overpower. And Beldum is here too. I think it's a meme pick, but we'll see. And I think this is the second last draft, so I think the last one here, yeah, the Azure Bay Chatots, last season's runner-up, running it back, chasing the championship now. Genesect, Dracovish, Clefable, Galarian Articuno, Sarina, Salazzle, Tyranitar, Stoutland, Kommo-o, Doublade, and Impidimp. So this one's a sand team to an extent. They have Tyranitar with 2 Sand Rush users, Stoutland, and more importantly, Dracovish. But it's also kind of just a good stuffs team to an extent. Dracovish is complemented as a water type by the grass type Sarina, which can shut down opposing priority. Given that Dracovish is a Pokemon that generally wants to go first, you probably want a Choice Scarf on it, or to have the Sand Rush active, or to have Tailwind from Articuno. You don't want opponents overwhelming it with priority before it gets to throw off those boosted Vicious Wrens, so Sarina makes a lot of sense here, shutting that down with the Queenly Majesty. Salazzle is a good fast support. It gets Fake Out, it can poison things, and get some chip damage along with the sand that creates openings for Pokemon like Dracovish and Stoutland to get some KOs. And it also is a fire type. Kommo-o gives them a whole other offensive angle with the setup option with Clangorous Soul, or it's flexible Pokemon. It can run a number of other sets as well. It also gets Overcoat, I think, so it's immune, if you want it to be, to your own sand damage. Doublade is a sand immune Pokemon that's fairly tanky with good defensive typing, especially because you can run an Eviolite on it. Impidimp gives them priority screens and Thunder Wave, you know, basic Grimmsnarl stuff. Clefable gives them redirection and also just a strong fairy type. I mentioned Galarian Articuno already for Tailwind. It also gets competitive, so that's an Intimidate answer again. It has trouble dealing with something like Incineroar, but maybe something like Salamence, Articuno, or Gyarados, it's not so afraid. It means you can't just spam Intimidate against the Tyranitar, Dracovish, Stoutland stuff. And Galarian Articuno also gets Trick Room, so if that's advantageous for them, they can try to set that. And it also gets Imprisoned, so they can use it to shut down an opponent's Trick Room, if that's beneficial to their speed control game. And then I talked about the Fire, Water, Grass, but they also have Fairy, Dragon, Steel. They have 2 Dragon types in Dracovish and Kommo-o. Fairy type and Clefable, and the Steel type is the mythical Genesect, a strong offensive Pokemon with a number of different coverage options, featured down here because I want to see mythical Pokemon shine this season. But yeah, overall, I've talked up some teams that I think are very well-rounded, and I've talked up some teams that just have really broken core synergies. This team, I think, has some of both. It's a really well-built, well-balanced draft, because the sand mode is obviously immediately very scary, but they also have a lot of great complementary supporting pieces around it. They have like all the speed control you could want. They have redirection. They have alternative offensive modes. They have ways to pile up residual damage. And they just have a good mix of Pokemon that complement each other really well. So this is going to be another team that's difficult to prepare for because there are a lot of different things that it can throw at you. You definitely can't just zero in on the sand and expect to deal with the rest of the Pokemon somehow while your main game plan is stopping the sand. And it's just a really well-balanced team that I think is going to be a threat all throughout the season for sure. And I have called out the East Coast Espurr as my favorite to win the championship. I am standing by that, but I could see the Chatots giving them a run for their money as well. And that is the draft for PDL Season 9. Like I said, not really sure how I feel about my own draft, but I think this is a team that can pile up a lot of wins. It depends to an extent on how I play it. I could see myself swapping out the Linoon. I do have some ideas left over from the draft. We'll also see how the Zygarde does, but I am interested in pairing Zygarde with Regieleki and like Weavile for a fast mode. And Zygarde, like I said, brings some support options to the table as well. And also just is one of the best content picks I could have made, I think. I didn't get a mythical Pokemon, but I did get a restricted legendary, which is also pretty rare in this format where they're mostly banned. I got a couple of interesting Gigantamax Pokemon. I got a bunch of cool Pokemon that aren't in Scarlet and Violet. And I got Gen 8 Regieleki. So I think win or lose, it's going to be a fun season. I'm really looking forward to it, although it's going to be difficult to switch the Sword and Shield part of my brain back on. There's some real cobwebs in there. But nothing left to do but get the season going. I think it's going to be similar to last season. I'll do my own sets on Mondays, and because I already have a Friday thing going on right now, I'll probably do commentary on the other sets on Thursdays. That's what I'm thinking right now, at least. But the usual 2 videos a week, I'm thinking Monday and Thursday, and it starts 1 week from today with my Week 1 set against the Windsor Whiscash. See you then.